Welcome back, everybody. Well, aren't we having a wonderful day? Full of insights, full of data, full of the uses of data, because it's not just about the data, it's what you're going to do with it. And bringing us along to our next session, which I've been really looking forward to all day. We're talking about travel and tourism sentiment, but we're asking, where's the recovery? Where are the green shoots? Now, we know that the travel and tourism industry has been decimated by COVID-19. We've heard evidence on that note pretty much all day and through the sessions, but there are green shoots. What we need to know is, where is the recovery and what will a bigger recovery look like? Do people still want to travel as soon as they're able? Is there pent-up demand, and where can that be tapped? Is there a way to encourage people to travel while still using COVID-safe practices? Which demographics do we see kicking off a tourism recovery? And if vaccination is mandated, does it make a difference? And how does it make a difference? We're going to walk through this territory with two guests who are admirably placed to answer the questions. I'm joined by Ross Veitch, who is CEO of Ouigo and also co-founder of the UAE-based travel website, that's Ouigo. And Tristan Thomas is Director of Digital, Commercial and Customer for Etihad. Gentlemen, while you're getting yourselves comfortable, we have a poll for those of you watching. And the poll question for this session is, given the current environment, are you comfortable planning and taking a trip this year? You've got three options: uncomfortable, neutral, or comfortable. Now, a gentleman who wasn't particularly comfortable this time last year was Ross Veitch, CEO and co-founder of Ouigo. Ross, your business was badly impacted, but you're seeing a recovery. Talk us through it.
Thanks, Eve, and thanks to DCT for the invite to participate today. So I've got a few slides. I'll whiz through them pretty quick. So a few observations, some data to share, and then we're going to have a bit of a conversation. So first of all, for those who don't know Ouigo, so we're actually dual headquartered in the UAE and Singapore. We're an online travel player. We're the largest online travel market in the Middle East. There's about 30 million people installed the Ouigo app. About 10 million people use us every month. A bit less now than pre-COVID, but and the pre-COVID, they're booking about $1.4 billion worth of travel a year, so reasonably significant. So, as you said, Eve, this is sort of what my dashboards looked like up until the middle of the year. So we're going along quite well. January, February, growing about 40% year over year. And then over the space of about 2 weeks, revenue went to almost zero. So at its worst, we were down to 2%. And this is largely a function of, we're very heavily exposed to MENA markets. MENA markets shut down pretty much completely. And fortunately, we're now sort of beginning to come back. So this is monthly data, going back to the beginning of last year. The two letter codes down the left side are the sort of country codes representing the origin markets, not the destinations, the origin markets. So you can see Saudi back to about 21% of where it was. Of the bunch, Turkey's actually doing the best for us. It's about 2/3 of the volume. And when I say volume here, we're looking at flight searches. So this is like top of the funnel. The GCC collectively somewhere between 16 and 35% by search volume, but you can see it varies quite a bit from month to month depending on what's happening with the restrictions at the time. Overall, these are the markets that overall we're looking at about 30% of the GCC markets. You can see UAE and Bahrain showing the most sense of being alive and wanting to travel again. KSA is somewhere in the middle, and Kuwait's trailing the pack. Both Kuwait and Saudi are basically pretty much shut down at the moment. This is what the funnel looks like. You can see, so this is a few different snapshots in time. The one on the far right, the column, sort of shows what it looks like today. you can see, and the percentages here are basically where we are now as a percentage of the average for last year. So in terms of sessions, we've got about 70% of the number of sessions going on that we had in 2019 overall. So it shows there's a lot of interest out there for people, looking for a way to get around, wanting to travel. Bottom of the funnel, where you've got bookings, then you've got revenue. You can see that it drops off to basically 38% for bookings, 35% for revenue. So this is a function of people wanting to travel but just being unable to. And I actually take this as a positive sign that there's demand out there. So as soon as restrictions go away, people will travel again. Okay, so I pulled together a few reasons I think we can be bullish about a recovery. At least if our businesses revolve around the Middle East. Okay, so first of all, vaccines are proving very effective at preventing illness and death. So this is some statistics from Israel. We pulled data from Israel because of the furthest along the vaccination curve. The 4 rows of 4 different demos. The top is the 60 pluses, next down 50, 59, and then down the age. The column on the right is showing the percentage of the population that have been vaccinated. Key takeaway from this, cases and positivity dropped dramatically as soon as people have been vaccinated. But more importantly, hospitalizations and serious illnesses dropped dramatically. So the vaccinations are doing what they need to in Israel. And this is true for other countries as well. In the UK, we've seen exactly the same thing. So blue here are the 80 pluses first. Pink is the rest of the population. You can see the hospitalizations and the deaths for the seniors dropped to almost nothing once they've been substantially vaccinated. And we're seeing the same pattern now in the US. Here pulled out some, so black is deaths across the total population. The red is the deaths in nursing homes, and indexed to what it was as at the start of the vaccination program. So you can see basically once people are vaccinated, they stop having serious illness from COVID. So this is important because it means governments can switch gears from trying to completely eliminate COVID at all costs, with like nationwide lockdowns and the like, to learning to live with it because people are going to stop dropping dead or being hospitalized. Okay, second reason to be positive. So vaccines are not only proving effective at stopping people from getting sick, they're also proving effective at limiting contagiousness. And this is not too terribly surprising, but if you've been vaccinated, you can still catch COVID to much lesser extent. But if you do, you're unlikely to have a viral load anywhere near that of somebody who has not been vaccinated. And infectiousness directly linked to viral load. And so you're far less risk to anybody around you who hasn't been vaccinated. Important for governments trying to decide how to reopen borders for international travel, be it travelers coming in or the protocols for their own residents to travel out and travel back again. All right, third reason to be confident about a strong recovery. So Middle East countries are leading the vaccine rollout. Sorry, try the clicker again. We've heard lots about what's going on in Israel. They're now close to 2/3, 3/4 of the population had 2 shots. UAE is not too far behind. I think it's like 80 shots per 100, so about 40% of the people have had 2 shots. Bahrain's not too far behind. Saudi's over 10% now and accelerating. So I think by the start of summer, most of the GCC, will have been vaccinated, or at least the segments of the population that are elderly or otherwise vulnerable to serious complications from COVID. Okay, fourth reason to be confident about a strong recovery. So health passports are going to make it easy to travel again. There's a bunch of different initiatives. I think the leading one is IATA's travel pass. This has been adopted by many of the world's leading airlines. It's in the EU are introducing their own digital passport for people moving around the EU. There's multiple initiatives in Asia. Pretty much every country that's now vaccinating has a variation on this, and governments are now talking to each other about recognizing each other's digital certificates. And in the Middle East, we're seeing the big Gulf carriers jump on board the IATA Travel Pass initiative and are sort of beginning to roll that out. So I think we all have travel passports in our future. I think we're going to see them when we're flying, when we're passing through airports, but I think we're also going to have them in our day-to-day lives. You want to go to the gym, you want to go to a theater, you want to go to a concert, there's going to be a travel passport involved. All right.
Fascinating stuff there, Ross. It'll be very interesting to go through that with Tristan, but I'll let you finish.
Sure. All right. So fifth reason I think we can be bullish about a fairly rapid recovery. We're seeing examples across multiple industry categories. So in countries where COVID gets back under control, spending is getting back to and then exceeding pre-COVID levels. So this has been labeled revenge spending, and I think we're very likely to see it in the travel category as well. And one of the reasons for that, you look at household savings rates, they're actually at historic highs across most developed markets. So the pandemic's been kind of a tale of two worlds, really. Like you've either lost your job and had to figure out a new way to survive, or you've actually been quite a bit, because you haven't been able to go out and spend the way you normally do. So there's a lot of people with a lot of firepower built up, and based on the survey results we've done at WeGo throughout the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are going to be making for lost time and have the financial savings in order to do it. And we're seeing that in third-party research as well. So this is some data from the US. So sentiment around COVID, is very much linked to the vaccine rollout. You can sort of see the blue line there is how positively people are thinking about where they're up to with the pandemic generally. And on the right side, you can see people ready to travel again. They're clearly correlated. This is some data from Amadeus Travel Audience. So in Europe, people are ready to go again. And interestingly, the UAE has been one of the top destinations on the list. So the number 1 in spring, number 5 for summer. So I think that bodes well. And last slide. So this is some WeGo booking data. Basically shows as soon as people are able to travel again, as soon as governments take away restrictions, we see the market immediately respond. So you can see mid-September, this is Saudi specifically. So mid-September, the Saudis relaxed some restrictions. We saw the market basically double. They closed down again mid-December. January 1, they announced they'd reopen again. You see that big immediate spike. And then early Feb, when concern around variants was at its peak, you can see travel was basically shut down again for most intents and purposes, and you can see it fell again. Takeaway from this, the demand is there. As soon as governments remove the restrictions, be it on the outbound side or on the inbound side, people will book. And I will leave it there.
Well,
Thank you.
You've ably answered my question there about the pent-up demand, Ross. In fact, as you were describing all the pent-up demand and all the people who have been lucky enough to keep jobs, who have been lucky enough to stockpile some savings, I just had a mental image of a lot of people running for the airport as soon as they were allowed. To answer the question as to where they might be going, we turn to Tristan Thomas, who's Director of Digital Commercial and Customer for Etihad. Tristan, so many things to unpick with you based on Ross's findings. But first of all, talk to me about the rules of network planning. They've changed beyond all recognition, but what's your perspective on it? Tristan, I think you've muted your mic.
Sorry,
you may need to speak to us.
Just stop pressing the mute. Yeah, firstly, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this critical conversation. And I think first thing to say is some really interesting insights from Ross. I think from a network planning point of view, you have to react to those sorts of spikes in the data that Ross was showing us. You in the past, you would have 6 months to a year to plan a route. You'd put a sales team in there. You'd build a marketing campaign. You'd have billboard ads. And now, of course, we have to react to governmental changes in the spaces of days and, if we're lucky, days, sometimes hours, in fact. And those closures and openings mean that network planning has to be far more nimble. The old airline model of having assets on the ground in outstations for catering, for fueling, we're having to challenge some of those assumptions. And for legacy carriers, that's much more difficult than low-cost carriers that tend to go out and back in a day. So I guess, like many industries, the main change has been that we need to be far more nimble. We need to take advantage of those opportunities that Ross flagged. We can't stick to kind of 10-year route plans. It's an hour-by-hour planning process at the moment.
I imagine it's something that keeps you on the edge of your seat, or alternatively, that keeps you awake at night, Tristan. Talk to me a little bit about the challenges for, we'll say, like you said, a legacy carrier like Etihad. Ross was saying that, he's seeing the shoots of recovery, but those shoots are really concentrated around the Gulf and Middle East area and also around certain destinations like the UK and the US. But obviously that's not going to be enough for a worldwide carrier like Etihad. What's the reaction there?
Yeah, I mean, Etihad is a hyperconnector. So significant flows between the US and India, for example, Europe and Asia for holiday traffic. And I think we're having to see a complete rebalancing in those. You're much more likely to see flows between countries that, say, are both vaccinated or countries with low COVID rates at the moment. I think we'll touch upon that a bit later. But certainly those big origin destination combos that were Etihad's lifeblood, they're certainly not running as we would expect right now. And of course, that's not because there's not demand. It's because the government restrictions at either end of a route are very limited. And we're finding that even if we offer incredible pricing, consumers aren't very willing to take 2-week quarantine periods, especially if it's at both ends, of course. That's very limiting for most people. So really the path to seeing some of those traditional big flows coming back will be government interactions to ensure so that we have corridors similar to the ones that we saw between Dubai and the UK at the end of last year.
Now, when we were discussing this earlier, Tristan, you came up with a very good analogy for how we should imagine the future going forward from our perspective in the UAE. And I remember you telling me it may be a smaller pie, but the UAE can still have a significant share of it. Can you talk to me about what will be necessary? First of all, what the UAE has, and Ross, I'll ask you this question to you afterwards. We seem to have lost Tristan's signal, so I'll take it to Ross. We have actually discussed this. How is the UAE placed at the moment to grab a slice of that pie? And what more is needed within the UAE in order to perhaps maybe coordinate a little bit better, maybe make sure that that pie is the slice of the pie. I'm whipping this analogy to death, but to make sure that we get as much of it as possible. Ross.
Sure. So two suggestions. So this is actually general, not aimed at UAE specifically. I think I think destinations should basically waive quarantine requirements if somebody can prove that they've been vaccinated. I think the research is in now that vaccinated travelers are no threat to the populations that they're going to be visiting. And as Tristan says, like 2-week quarantines are going to absolutely kill demand. So that's the first thing that needs to change. And for the UAE specifically, the country's done an amazing job of keeping COVID under control and keeping life moving through COVID. And more importantly, or as importantly, they've sort of been vaccinating at a record clip. And I think we're now at the point where pretty much everybody, all residents who are vulnerable, to COVID, so the elderly, those with comorbidities, have now been vaccinated. If not now, very soon. And I think maybe that gives us that gives each of the Emirates maybe a chance to come together and unify the approach to travel, both inbound and outbound, which would greatly assist everybody in the industry who's working it from either end.
Brilliant.
I understand why there was different approaches from Emirate to Emirate, but I think now that most people are vaccinated, I think it's a good time to come together and unify it. That would remove one obstacle to accelerating the rebound of tourism in the region.
It is something that we have seen throughout the various sessions today. Tristan, your reaction, what's Etihad doing to ensure that it grabs the biggest slice of the pie? Tell us about the pent-up demand that's there and also what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think as well as vaccination, improving safety for your own population so that your government can relax, it also offers safety certainty for your travellers as well. And whilst the percentage of the world's population that's perhaps worried about COVID is maybe arguably diminishing with the number of people that are vaccinated, there are still people who care greatly about health and their wellness. And one of the things that I think has gone well for Etihad is its strategy of pursuing a PCR test requirement for every passenger on board. And in our customer analysis, we see that it's the biggest factor on the consumers' willingness or happiness on board the aircraft, their willingness to travel and their happiness on board Etihad. They identify it above the quality of the food, the quality of the entertainment on board, the cabin crew, even our timeliness. It's leapt right to the top of the list. People want to feel safe. And I think Abu Dhabi has a unique opportunity to leverage the safety that it's created by vaccinating its public at home, and of course, same with Dubai, the other Emirates too. So I think that the pent-up demand is waiting to go to countries where people have some degree of safety. So yes, I think as soon as those government borders are open, we'll see people rush back to places like the UAE.
But will they be ready to give up their personal data in order to do so? I know we've looked at this issue when we were preparing for this. Gentlemen, what do you think is going to be the trade-off between data privacy and being able to travel, Ross?
I mean, I think it's a bit of a non-issue, to be honest, Eve. I mean, if you think about the amount of data you already give up in order to cross an international border, adding your vaccination status is relatively trivial in the bigger scheme of things, particularly relative to the amount of data people are already feeding into social media platforms, Google, Facebook, etc. So I think this issue has been a little bit overblown. That said, the IATA guys have been working on the travel pass, have come up with some creative solutions so that your identity, your status can be effectively downloaded to your device, and then you can verify against the central repository your status, but then you don't actually have to give anybody else access to the entire database in order for that to happen. So it's all on device.
So there are ways to mitigate people's worries. Tristan, can I ask you before we have to leave it, because this is an interesting one from the perspective of Etihad and its route network. We seem to be seeing two different forms of approach to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing the countries like the UAE, the US, the UK that are focusing on getting everybody in the population vaccinated as quickly as possible. But then we're also seeing countries like Australia and New Zealand who have decided to keep the country as clean as possible and who haven't yet rolled out a vaccine program for all of the citizens. How's that going to work if you want to join up the countries of the world? Tristan?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's actually quite hard for one country to move from one model to another. And I guess we're probably seeing now that divide. The same divide will now be maintained for a number of years. It's hard to imagine that the Australians, the Kiwis, will have the political will to flip out and deliver a model of vaccination. Conversely, if you're vaccinating your population, people won't want to limit international travel. So I think we are seeing those two bodies of countries, and it's unlikely that you'll be able to move easily between the two. We just hope that governments allow travel between those bundles of countries. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to, because as we've started to see, Australia and New Zealand opening a Trans-Tasman corridor, and maybe the vaccinated countries will soon strike up bilateral agreements, multilateral agreements, which essentially create giant bubbles which allow travel between those places. But of course, from Etihad's point of view, that's a very different network, travel network, to the one we're used to. The traditional model of connecting East and West is our lifeblood, so that'll be heavily disrupted by this change. It's really a fascinating scenario for the next year or so.
It certainly is. We live in interesting and challenging times. Ross and Tristan, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to speak to you to get those insights. We have our poll result, and we asked you, given the current environment, are you comfortable planning and taking a trip this year? So we asked, were you uncomfortable, neutral, or comfortable? And we can tell you it's a straight 50-50 between uncomfortable and comfortable. There's no middle ground when people are talking about their comfort in taking a trip. Just going back over what we went through with the gentlemen, we talked through the trend. The GCC is recovering in line with vaccinations. The world of travel, especially airline travel as we know it, is still some distance away. There are two different approaches, what we would call the COVAX countries, like the UK, the US, and the UAE, versus, well, I suppose not versus, but it's a different approach, the isolationist countries like Australia and New Zealand. And the challenge going forward in the long term will be how the travel industry reconciles those two very, very different approaches. We're looking at the smaller pie, but the UAE is admirably placed to grab a very big part of it. That, how big, will depend on joined up thinking across the UAE between the sectors and the Emirates. We continue our analysis, we continue our insights, and we've got another session coming up just after this with Hisham and more guests.